the kind of conditionalities. We can't do it all across the world and just, so the alternate narrative would not just come up like that. It may take another 5 years or 10 years to really assume that role, and that's why I said it's very historic moment that South has created an institution, and I really wish it would go a long way in terms of consolidating. So you are right, $100 billion is not much when you have to face several cycles of short-term liquidity crunch in several parts of the world, but then definitely it symbolizes some sort of supporting hand. And that's what I think South now stands for.
But we are told it could be as long as 2 years before this bank actually begins its
operations. Because India has an exception of not going to parliament for ratification, but rest of the BRICS members have to go to their parliaments, and you know it takes long for them. Otherwise, in India, we can get it out through executive order. Others have to go to their parliament, so it may take some time for them. And then, of course, all money would not come in one go. It would come in installments, like South Africa was very keen that it should come in 10 installments, and India and China, they agreed for 2, but then they have decided that 5 installments for everyone. So those modalities are more procedural, and I think we should respect that.
Okay, Mr. Mishra, on the question of China, you know, we are told that China was the major stumbling block that was coming in the way of the negotiations. The question of the location of the bank, of course, which has been sorted out, the question of the contingency fund and so on. How genuine are these concerns when it comes to China? It is a fact that China is an overwhelming economic force in this grouping.
Let us accept ground realities. China is the biggest economy in BRICS.
Right.
Now, if they wanted to have their say, it was very legitimate. But then, what is the end result? Let us put it that way. End result is, yes, this bank will be headquartered in China, in Shanghai. Perfectly all right.
They had the
But then, what constitutes the board of directors? They have equal vote.
Right.
Now, that is what counts. Number 2, Rome was not built in a day. It's a first step. As economies of the BRICS countries grow, I am sure they would contribute much more. And no bank grows overnight.
Right.
Now, this is the beginning. Once the bank has been set, it starts functioning. I am sure it will grow, and it will grow for the benefit of developing countries. Now, that is our objective. Our objective is not sheer profit, that at all cost bank has to make profit. Bank has first element of profit, but what profit? Has there to be agreed in it. That is all is important.
Right.
I'm very, very positive that this bank will serve the real need of the people who are poor, impoverished, and they need support. That is what at the heart of it.
Okay, Ambassador Kumar, what do you have to say about concerns relating to China? In particular, China's economy is bigger than all other economies of the BRICS grouping put together. It is the largest trading partners of each of the individual BRICS nations. How genuine are these concerns? The fact that more funding would mean more influence for China.
I think we do know this, and not just us, but the other countries too, that China, because of the size of the economy, it naturally, whichever organization it's part of, it tends to dominate that. So I think the other countries in the BRICS grouping, they're also not small countries either. So they're very conscious of the fact that it should not happen that BRICS would tend to be dominated by one particular country. So I think that was the starting point for all of them, not just India, but also for Russia, Brazil, and South Africa. So as regards the way this bank has been structured, the location, so on and so forth, I think that is why it's been part of a compromise. I mean, all have made this compromise. The Chinese have done that, Indians have done it, Brazilians have done it, South Africa has done it. I mean, as you know, the regional office of this bank would be in South Africa. So that is a kind of a in a way, it's a kind of a balancing which is being done like that. So I think that would be the overall governing philosophy of this particular grouping, and to that extent, it will proceed to, according to the comfort level of all the member countries. But I think overall the philosophy is very sound, because you have this bank which will do concessional lending, and as it is, I think the $50 billion is not such a big thing, because the banks do raise money in the capital markets. They have other partnerships, and it goes on like that. So you actually in a way can multiply its capacity to actually fund projects, both within the BRICS countries and outside in other developing countries. But that's one thing. The support, because what has happened since the 2008 financial crisis is the currency fluctuations all over the world. So the countries need actually protection against that kind of thing, and that volatility can again come back to the market. So this actually is a good kind of a thing that they're doing. And so also the plan that you have, you can actually lend against the country's currency, lending country's currency, or the lent country's currency. So thereby you actually in a way try to detach yourself from the dollar-denominated global trade and investment. So I think this overall philosophy is very important. It is not just unique to the BRICS, but this is actually the conclusion of the G20 itself, because that is one of the ways in which you can stabilize the volatility in the global economy. So I think it's part of that larger scheme, and I think it is very good. It's a very good beginning.
Okay, but Dr. Chaturvedi, other than being seen as an alternative to the West, do these economies have a common economic agenda?
When we say common economic agenda, I think we would have to decipher it at two levels. One is in terms of the macro variables, and second is in terms of philosophy. And as I said earlier, philosophy is some way you find a sort of convergence, and as Professor Mishra rightly mentioned, there are internal challenges all of them face. Again, Russia is a separate entity in this grouping, but rest of them have their domestic challenges. South Africa has huge a population to be brought out of the poverty line. India is struggling. China also has their own pockets for poverty. So domestic challenges at the economic level, Brazil exactly, despite of the fact that they have one of the strongest programs for social parity, but still they have challenges. So that way I think we would have to realize the fact that the development trajectory that they have to cover is quite similar. Now when it comes to accomplishments, China, as you rightly pointed out in the beginning, is in a very different ball game. And China has huge foreign exchange reserves. They have wherewithals to address some of these challenges, but they have their own internal contradictions, which is holding them back. So when you see or when you say sort of economic interest, I think the development agenda is very similar. Economic challenges may differ according to specific sectors like exports or imports, even in terms of foreign exchange reserves, deficit financing that each one is running. So that may vary, but the common thread that I see is the development challenge.
And very quickly on intra-BRICS trade, these economies, bulk of their trade is with the developed world.
Yes, but then as was pointed out by Ambassador Kumar, the intra-BRICS trade has also expanded, and the latest report from UNCTAD shows it very clearly that the share of developing countries in the global trade has expanded from 47% to 57%.
All right.
In the period 2009 to 2014. So that brings out very clearly, and in this the major share is of the BRICS. So if you see a paper which IMF brought out in January this year, it very clearly shows how BRICS countries are influencing the growth prospects for low-income countries by getting them out from their poverty challenges. And that I think is largely explaining the traction BRICS have provided.
All right, I'll just come to you. We have to slip into yet another break here. Stay with us. We'll be back with the final segment of the show. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking about the outcome of the BRICS summit. Ambassador Kumar, I'll continue with you.
Yes, one point I wanted to make. I think this intra-BRIC trade, because the fact that, these are fairly sophisticated economies, and therefore it is not very difficult for the business people and the economic ministers of these countries to look at various opportunities through which, and through proper policy incentives, to actually change the direction of trade somewhat, so that there is no overall dependency on the developed economies, which actually themselves are very vulnerable and they're facing their own challenges. And I can just give one example, but there are several of them. The recent agreement between Russia and China, where they're talking about a huge, sort of sale of gas to the tune of something like $500 billion, something like that. Because earlier, the Russians want to redirect also their energy trade because of the fact that because of the linkage with the West, they feel that the West actually might try to squeeze and actually put pressure on them. Similarly, when President Putin met Prime Minister Modi recently, he did talk about the possibility as to how there can be collaboration in the field of energy. And one of the things could be perhaps to find a gas pipeline to come into India. That's just an example, but you can multiply these examples. In fact, that's what was discussed, and you had the business forum and the business council. This is where they are looking at all these possibilities.
Right. Professor Chaturvedi, what kind of projects are we really looking at? We understand that the focus is going to be on infrastructure, but is it going to be something along the lines of the World Bank? They are doing, hard infrastructure projects as well as soft ones. It's also into a lot of governance work. If we look at Africa in particular, anti-corruption and so on, will this bank operate on the same lines?
As you see the concept note which is going around for the BRICS Bank, you find a sort of objective hovering around the challenges largely the South is facing. So I would not discount they supporting agriculture projects, they supporting value chains across southern economies, and even some of the areas which require access to high technology. So you may have a portfolio which is very mixed. And I think we should not see BRICS Bank as an isolated initiative.
Okay.
We should also put that in the perspective of the other initiatives which BRICS is considering. And there India's proposal of having BRICS University or fellowship for young scientists, even promotion of languages, because they bring up, come up with all different kinds of languages. So support for those kind of initiatives. We should not disconnect the larger development priorities that BRICS is attaching, not only within the BRICS platform, but also articulating it in G20 with the larger development challenges that South is facing. So I would assume that the BRICS Bank would have a very mixed portfolio. It would definitely jump in for the kind of challenges one or two major economies are facing. So it would be very symbolic right in the beginning. And as I said, Argentina probably would be the first one to get benefit down the line in next 2 or 3 years' time. Then the second dimension of this is also to support countries cope up with short-term liquidity crisis, with the US tapering and playing around with their, and largely they have their own challenges, which has spillover effects on other countries and their prospects to export. Particularly the commodity futures. And China is very keen that we support countries which are adversely affected by commodity futures. And this was the point they raised in Delhi when we discussed the BRICS Bank for the first time. And the first proposal that came from China was to insulate economies which are adversely affected because of commodity futures. And in China's own neighborhood, a couple of ASEAN countries got adversely affected when commodity futures started functioning from US. Rice and other crops were affected. So I think we would have a very mixed portfolio.
Very quickly, you mentioned easier terms of lending by this bank, but many would say that this could also mean borrowing for projects that really serve no purpose, that could, lead to frittering away of wealth. For instance, in the 80s, we've seen the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It was faced with a similar situation. What do you think?
I think they would have to work out operational guidelines, and I think the next 2 years would provide clear opportunity as the procedure for approvals take place. I think they would have to devise ways to balance broad commitments of the grouping and the priorities. And then, of course, some sound financial guidelines to manage the portfolio. And that, I think, is extremely important. But as I said, this is a symbolic step. Okay. And symbolic step would definitely try to address cases which are very symbolic in nature within the South. So we would have a very mixed portfolio. Idea is not to have huge profits out of those ventures, but definitely support the South.
Mr. Mishra, the announcement of a bank, a multilateral institution such as the Development Bank, do you think it's going to give the BRICS nation a greater voice on the larger global political arena as well?
It already has a voice, as Ambassador just now said. I mean, after all, BRICS countries played a big role in G20. I mean, when the question of revision of quotas came, and the quotas have been revised to an extent, not to that extent,
but as not implemented.
Not been implemented. They have been, So, fact of the matter is that they agreed and that they're stalling it now. Now, so voice is there, and voice is going to grow in coming years.
But there is this criticism that they have failed to take a position on many global issues that we are faced with today. For instance, the crisis in Syria last year, or the West Asia crisis in Iraq.
You are mixing up two issues. Now, you are talking of political issues. Now, fact of the matter remains that the crisis in Syria, each BRIC country has a different position on it,
right?
Because of the geopolitical necessities, because of the old Cold War calculations, and also of the ground realities. While US has a different agenda, the Russia has a different agenda, China has a different agenda. India, because of its past association with Syria, has a different stand on these issues.
But there you find India, Brazil, South Africa, IPSA, they have a common position on Syria.
Right.
So within BRICS, IPSA is very important.
But then there are issues like climate change where Russia is
where
not
again
on board.
IPSA have a common position.
Right, but Russia is not on board.
So Russia and China
if I'm completely out of time, a quick word from you, Ambassador Kumar. Don't you think the BRICS grouping should put its weight behind global issues that we are faced with, such as these crises? Because after all, setting up of a multilateral institution could be a means to a larger political end.
Well, quite a bit of it's happening already. As you know, the BRICS foreign ministers, they have a healthy tradition of meeting, coordinating positions at the United Nations General Assembly before the General Assembly begins. And I think the larger point basically is correct, that in some way, the kind of, in the manner in which these crises have been handled by the West, they in a way somehow have hijacked the multilateral institutions and completely aggravated situations, whether you take the case of Syria or before that take the case of Libya or even for that matter Ukraine. Yeah. So I think what the BRICS are doing, of course, I understand, and one should not minimize the difference amongst ourselves, BRICS, but I think on some issues there is a commonality of position, and if we actually can stick to that, I think that gives us a good starting point on many of the issues.
All right, well, with that, it's time for me to wrap up this discussion here. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you all here. That's it for now in this edition of Insight. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.